You are 4 weeks old, not 4 years. 4 weeks, you do not have a name yet. You do not have a face yet. You are a cluster of cells smaller than a grain of rice, floating inside your mother. And you are growing something you will never use. You are growing a tail. For a few weeks, you have one. It forms at the base of your spine, just like the tail of a fish, a bird, a dog, a monkey. It has 10 to 12 vertebrae, real bones arranged in a real sequence. Then, around week 8, your body quietly deletes it. The vertebrae fuse. The tail is absorbed by programmed cell death, the same process that shapes your fingers when they separate in the womb. You are born with 4 fused bones where your tail used to be, and you never think about them again. That deletion is an engineering feat in its own right. Building a tail takes days of careful construction. Cells migrate, vertebrae form, muscles attach, blood vessels grow along the length of it. Then, the demolition crew arrives. Every cell in the tail receives a signal to die, in a precise order, from the tip backward, so that the body can reabsorb the material instead of leaving a stump. The timing has to be perfect too early, and the spine is incomplete too late. And you are born with a tail. Your body runs this demolition on schedule. Every time, in every pregnancy, for every human who has ever existed. You have never once noticed it happening. That brief, pointless tail is a ghost. It is the leftover of a body plan that your ancestors used for roughly 200 million years of vertebrate history. And the fact that it appears and vanishes inside you is the doorway into one of the strangest stories in human evolution. Why did humans lose their tails? When did it happen? And what did we trade for it? The obvious answer, the one that gets repeated in classrooms and documentaries, is that we lost our tails so we could walk upright. It sounds so reasonable. Tails get in the way of bipedalism. We stood up, so the tail had to go. It is a clean story with a satisfying shape. It is also wrong by about 20 million years. The truth is that humans lost their tails roughly 25 million years ago, long before anyone stood up on 2 legs. The real reason has nothing to do with walking, and the actual mechanism, which scientists only cracked in 2024, is hiding inside a single piece of so-called junk DNA that rewrote the instructions for building your spine. Let me take you back to the beginning. Every vertebrate on Earth starts life with the same basic plan. A head at one end, a body in the middle, and a tail at the other. The tail is not an afterthought. It is one of the oldest structures in the animal kingdom. Fish use tails to swim. Birds use them to steer and balance. Kangaroos use them as a third leg, propping themselves up while they kick. Squirrels use theirs as a parachute and a blanket. Monkeys use theirs as a 5th limb, especially the New World monkeys with prehensile tails, which can hang from a branch by their tail alone while both hands are busy grabbing fruit. For early primates, the tail was a piece of essential equipment. Primates evolved in trees, and a tail is a balance beam. If you spend your life running along the tops of branches, a long tail shifting counterweight helps you stay upright. Every monkey that lives in the treetops today still relies on this trick. Baboons run along branches with their tails streaming behind them like a tightrope walker. S-pole. Some primates took the tail even further. The spider monkeys and howler monkeys of Central and South America have prehensile tails, tails that can grip. The underside of the tail is bare and lined with skin ridges like a fingerprint, and a spider monkey can hang its entire body weight from a single branch by its tail, while both arms are busy reaching for fruit. The tail there is not a counterweight, it is a hand. This is what the tail can become when a lineage doubles down on it instead of deleting it. The contrast with the ape family could not be sharper. One branch of the primate tree turned the tail into a 5th limb. The other branch turned it into 4 fused bones and a memory. Then, around 25 to 30 million years ago, something happened. The primate family tree split into 2 huge branches. One branch kept the tail, That branch became the old world monkeys, the baboons, the macaques, the colobus monkeys you see today. The other branch lost the tail. That branch became the apes. And eventually, you. The fossil record shows this transition clearly. Early apes from the Oligocene, around 30 million years ago, still had tail vertebrae. Their descendants, the ones that appear after the split from the monkeys, have a dramatically different lower spine. The tail is reduced to a few short elements. The pelvis begins to take the shape that all modern apes share. By about 20 million years ago, the tailless body plan was locked in, and every ape since, from gibbons to gorillas to humans, has been born without a working tail. You can walk through that transition in fossils. Egyptopithecus, a small ape-like primate that lived in Egypt around 30 million years ago, still had a full tail. Proconsul, which lived in East Africa about 20 million years ago and is one of the earliest definite apes, had lost most of its tail vertebrae. By the time of the later Miocene apes, the tail skeleton is gone entirely. The paleontological record reads like a before and after photo. Tailed primate, then a few reduced vertebrae, then nothing. The transition did not happen overnight. It happened over millions of years. But from the perspective of a genome, it happened almost immediately. A single adjustment to a single gene that produced a gradual physical result. So the tail disappeared 25 million years ago. When did upright walking begin? Around 6 to 7 million years ago. That is the date of the earliest fossil evidence for bipedal ancestors. And even that early form was not the confident striding walk we have today. It was a shuffling, experimental kind of uprightness. Do the math. The tail vanished about 25 million years ago. Upright walking appeared about 7 million years ago. That is a gap of roughly 18 million years. The tail did not go because we stood up. We stood up 18 million years later for reasons that had nothing to do with the tail. So, if not walking, what? The leading answer comes from how the early apes actually moved. Long before they walked on two legs, they swung. They brachiated. That means they hung below branches and moved hand over hand through the canopy the way gibbons and orangutans still do today. And here is the key insight. Swinging below a branch is completely different from running on top of one. When you run on top of a branch, a tail is a counterweight. It helps. When you hang below a branch, a tail is a liability. It is dead weight at the end of your body. It catches on twigs and vines. It snags when you reach around a trunk. It dangles behind you and makes noise, which matters when you are trying to move quietly, and it gives a predator something to grab. If a big cat or an eagle grabs your tail, you are done. A tail that helps you balance on top of a branch is a liability when you live underneath them. Evolution is not a designer. It is a tinkerer. It does not plan ahead. It just keeps whatever works and slowly discards what does not. For apes that had switched to a life of swinging below the canopy, the tail stopped earning its keep. The cost of carrying it outweighed the benefit. So over millions of years, the tail got shorter, the vertebrae fused, and the body deleted it entirely. The proof that this was a lifestyle change, not a walking change, is still visible today. Look at the apes. Gibbons, which are the most extreme brachiators, are completely tailless. Orangutans, which spend most of their lives in trees hanging from branches, are tailless. Gorillas and chimpanzees, which are bigger and spend more time on the ground, are also tailless. The whole ape family lost the tail when it became a family of swingers, and it kept the loss even after some members came back down to the ground. The monkeys, which stayed on top of the branches, kept their tails for the same reason. Different lifestyle, different equipment. That was the story scientists could tell from fossils. What they could not tell was the mechanism. How do you delete a tail from a genome? What exact change happened inside the DNA? For decades, that question sat unanswered. There was one more clue hiding in the history of science itself. The gene that eventually turned out to be the tail deletion culprit has a name with a story attached. TBXT is the human version of a gene first identified in mice in the 1920s, when researchers noticed a mutant strain with a shortened tail. They named the mutation brachyury, from the Greek words for short tail. For 100 years, scientists studied this gene as a curiosity of mouse development, never suspecting that it held the answer to one of the great questions of primate evolution. The short-tail mouse was a message in a bottle, waiting 25 million years for someone to read it. Then came 2024. In February 2024, a team of researchers led by Bouchard at NYU Grossman School of Medicine published a paper in the journal Nature with a title that says exactly what they found. On the genetic basis of tail loss evolution in humans and apes, and what they found was a smoking gun. Bouchard's team compared the genomes of tailless apes, including humans, with the genomes of tailed monkeys. They were looking for genetic changes that the tailless group shared, but the tailed group did not. And they found one. It was hiding inside a gene called TBXT, which is one of the master genes that builds the spine and the notochord, the early structure that defines the body axis of every vertebrate. Inside the TBXT gene of the ape ancestor, there was a small insertion. A piece of mobile DNA called an ALU element had jumped into the middle of the gene. ALU elements are often called junk DNA. They are short, self-copying sequences that litter the genome, and most of them do nothing. But this particular ALU element landed in exactly the wrong place. Here is the clever, messy part. The ALU insertion created a fake splice site. When the cell reads the TBXT gene and makes its protein, it sometimes uses this fake site and cuts the gene short. The result is a shortened version of the TBXT protein, and that shortened protein is good enough to build a normal spine, but not good enough to build a full tail. The ape ancestor did not lose the tail because the tail gene was destroyed. The tail gene was fine. The ape ancestor lost the tail because a piece of junk DNA landed inside the gene and created an alternate reading that quietly shortens the protein. It is like finding a typo in the middle of a manual that changes one instruction, and that one changed instruction changes the entire machine. Bouchard's team did not stop at the genetic correlation. They proved the mechanism in living animals. They engineered mice to carry the same ALU insertion in the mouse version of the TBXT gene. And they watched what happened. The mice developed tails that were shorter, kinked, or completely absent. Some mice lost the tail entirely. Some had stubby, bent tails. The pattern matched exactly what the genetic prediction said. Think about what that experiment means. A single piece of mobile DNA inserted into a single gene is enough to delete a tail, not a whole cascade of mutations, not millions of years of gradual change. One insertion, one fake splice site, one shortened protein, and the tail is gone. This is one of those discoveries that changes how you see evolution. We tend to think of evolution as a process of slow accumulation, tiny changes piling up over eons, and sometimes it is. But sometimes a single event, a single genetic accident, reshapes an entire lineage. The loss of the tail, one of the most dramatic changes in primate anatomy, may have started with one piece of DNA landing in one gene at one moment, roughly 25 million years ago. There is an irony here that geneticists love. The ALU element is part of what scientists once dismissed as junk. For decades, researchers believed that most of the human genome was useless filler evolutionary litter that did nothing. The tail loss discovery turned that idea on its head. The junk did something. It deleted a tail. It reshaped the skeleton of an entire branch of the animal kingdom. The stuff we called garbage was running the show. To appreciate how unlikely this was, you need to know how common ALU elements are. There are more than 1 million copies of them in the human genome, making up over 10% of your total DNA. They are fragments of ancient viruses and transposable elements that learned how to copy themselves and paste the copies back into the genome, generation after generation. Most of them land in harmless places in the vast stretches of DNA between genes, where they do nothing at all. The tail loss ALU element was different. It landed inside a gene, in a spot where it changed how the gene is read. 1 in a million insertions, and that one reshaped your skeleton. There is one more layer to the tail that is easy to miss, and it is about nerves. A tail is not just bone and muscle. It is packed with nerves, and for many animals, it is a sense organ in its own right. A cat's tail flicks with mood. A dog's tail communicates joy and fear. A fish's tail sends signals about water pressure. When the ape lineage deleted its tail, it deleted not just an appendage but an entire sensory surface. The information that used to stream in from the tail was simply gone. In its place, humans got something else. We got hands that can feel, fingers that can read texture, and a brain wired for touch. The sensory budget that went to the tail was spent elsewhere. Evolution does not waste a good idea. It just moves it. Now, you might be wondering what happened to the tail we still have. Because you have a tailbone. You can feel it if you sit up straight and reach behind you. The coccyx, the fused remnant of those 4 tail vertebrae, sits at the very bottom of your spine. It is the ghost of the tail, the part your body never quite finished deleting. And the ghost still causes trouble. Coccydynia, tailbone pain, affects millions of people every year. It usually starts with a backward fall, directly onto the tailbone, and it can turn sitting into a misery for months. There is a cruel comedy in this. Your ancestors spent millions of years deleting this structure because it was no longer useful, and the tiny remnant they left behind still manages to hurt you every time you fall. The tail is gone, but it is not forgotten. The tailbone is not purely decorative either. Muscles and ligaments attach to it, and it carries part of your body weight when you sit. The coccyx also gives support to the pelvic floor, the sling of muscles that holds your organs in place. So the remnant is doing real work. Even now, it is a perfect example of how evolution recycles. Nothing is thrown away if it can be repurposed. The tail became a keel for muscles, a support for the pelvis, and a source of pain when you land on it badly. 3 jobs, none of them the job it was built for. There is an even stranger piece of this story, and it is about the tail you almost had. Rarely, a baby is born with a small, fleshy protrusion at the base of the spine. Doctors call it a vestigial tail or a true tail. It is the ghost of the embryonic tail that was supposed to be absorbed before birth. But for a small number of people, the deletion does not fully happen. The protrusion is usually harmless and can be surgically removed, but it is a reminder that your body still carries the instructions for building a tail. It has just learned to delete them on time. Think about what this means for how you understand your own body. Your genome is not a blueprint drawn by an architect. It is a palimpsest, a document that has been written, erased, and rewritten over hundreds of millions of years. The instructions for building gills are still in your genome. The instructions for building a tail are still in your genome. You just mostly do not use them anymore. Your body is a museum of ancient equipment, and every so often, one of the exhibits wakes up. There is a deeper point hidden in the tail story, and it is worth sitting with. When we lose something through evolution, we usually think of it as an upgrade. We lost fur, we gained sweat glands. We lost strength, we gained brains. But the tail loss was not an upgrade in that clean sense. It was a trade. The apes traded a balance beam for a body that could swing. They traded a long, expressive tail for a short, silent pelvis. And millions of years later, their descendants traded swinging for walking, and then walking for standing still and thinking. None of those steps was planned. Each one was a tinkerer's fix to a problem in the moment. Your tailbone is the receipt for that long series of trades. Every time you sit down, you are sitting on the evidence of a deal made 25 million years ago. Every time you fall and bruise it, you are reminded that the deal had a hidden cost. Here is the strangest thought of all. The tail loss may have set the stage for everything that came after. Apes without tails could not balance on top of branches the way monkeys do, so they were pushed into the swinging lifestyle, and swinging led to the upright posture of the ancestors. An upright posture freed the hands, and freed hands built tools, and tools built everything else. The entire human story may hang, quite literally, from a piece of junk DNA that landed in the wrong gene at the right time. There is a word for this kind of story. In biology, exaptation. It is the term for a feature that evolved for one purpose and then got borrowed for something completely different. The tail loss was an adaptation for swinging. Then swinging became an adaptation for posture. Then posture became an adaptation for tool use. Then tools became an adaptation for civilization. Each step borrowed what the previous step left behind. Your tailbone is the first coin in that chain of borrowing. The original investment that everything else was built on. So the next time you fall on your tailbone and curse the universe, remember what it really is. That small, aching bone is not useless. It is a record. It is the receipt for a 25-million-year-old deal. Your ancestors traded a tail for a different way of moving through the world. They traded balance for swing. They traded communication for expression. And the evidence of that trade is still sitting at the bottom of your spine. You are not a creature that always lacked a tail. You are a creature whose genome deleted one. The deletion is still there. The protein is still shortened. The fossil is still inside you. You lost your tail before you were you.